talk today, I will be kind of setting the stage, not giving, I can't give you firm answers. It's an uncertain world we live in, as we will see, but I am setting the stage for alternative and renewable energy in Alberta. And the first thing I'd like to set the stage is when Premier Red first came in as Premier, she did make a commitment that Alberta would design and implement an initiative to make the province of Alberta the national leader in energy efficiency and sustainability. I don't know where it points to. If it was my TV, I'd have to be very specific. And energy sustainability can be described as that Alberta's energy system should achieve a sustainable balance of environmental, social, and economic outcomes. This triangle, you could take energy out of there if you want to say sustainability. That balance of environmental, economic, and social, I think that is something that the Synergy Alberta folks relate to, because really at the end of the day, you are trying to achieve that balance. And so we are trying to do that for energy in Alberta as well. So when we're looking at alternative and renewable energy policy in Alberta, there are three key strategies that we hang our hats on right now. One is the climate change strategy, the second is the provincial energy strategy, and the third, which goes beyond our borders, is the Canadian energy strategy. The climate change strategy is basically owned by the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Resource Development. They are responsible for it. And many of you have probably seen this picture. The important part for my work is that there's that orange wedge there in the middle that identifies that by 2050, greening energy production will contribute 37 megatons of CO2 reductions in the province, out of the total target of 200 megatons by 2050. Are we on track? The answer is probably not. But since we're at the greening energy production piece has a very small wedge at the beginning and kind of grows later, I think we still have a chance to catch up. Anyway, this value may change over time, but that's what it is today as of set out in 2008. Two very important things are happening around the climate change strategy. One is there's a key piece of legislation under this strategy called the Climate Change Emissions Management Act, and under that lives the Specified Gas Emitters Regulation. And this regulation is set to expire next fall, and it's the regulation that dictates that large emitters shall reduce their emissions, and then it creates opportunities for where if you're a farmer or a renewable energy producer, you can generate carbon offsets based on your emissions reductions, which you can then sell into Alberta's carbon market. And that regulation allows that to happen. The other important piece is that the federal government is implementing these things we call, in our shop we call them the federal coal regs. What it is they're regulations dictating that emissions from coal-generated electricity shall be reduced to almost nothing, I don't have the exact number, by a certain date. And what it basically means to coal generators, you either shut down or do something like adopt carbon capture and storage. So that comes into force 2015, but doesn't mean that coal has to comply by 2015. They do have a number of years to meet that obligation. So those are two very important pieces tied to the climate change strategy. Then the provincial energy strategy happened to come out at the same year as the current iteration of climate change strategy, and three outcomes identified: clean energy production, wise energy use, and sustained economic prosperity. And alternative and renewable energy particularly relates to clean energy production and to sustained economic prosperity. Then the Canadian energy strategy is the newest initiative that alts and renewables linked to. And this, as I said, is beyond our borders. It's a collaborative effort under the Council of Federations of provinces and territories that volunteer to participate in initiatives under this federation. And so Alberta is very much participating in this, and they identified 10 themes that they want to pursue under the Canadian Energy Strategy, and alternative and renewable energy development is one of them. And in fact, as you may know, Premier Redford, she is very much committed to this initiative, and she stated that her objective in our participating is to hand over healthy Alberta to future generations. And this ideal guides her thinking on energy issues. But what's important is there's some things that a province can do or a territory can do on their own, but there's some things that you can do more effectively by working together or by learning from each other. So as far as developing this alternative and renewable energy policy framework, this framework is to set out, we expect it'll be to set out some guidance as to policy direction for encouraging alternative and renewable energy in the future. One of the questions always comes up, well, what is alternative and renewable energy? Renewable energy is the easier thing to define. One of the definitions they use is something that can be replenished within an average human lifespan. Now, of course, if the wind's blowing, it's replenished all the time, and then it stops blowing, then it starts blowing. And solar, of course, it's replenished constantly, except at night. But things like biomass, it's like turning a forest over and regrowing it in 80 years. Then alternative energy is a little more difficult to define. It's a very subjective term, and it depends on your frame of reference and how you want to define it. Right now, our working definition is alternative energy is energy that is lower emissions than conventional. So alternative energy doesn't have to be renewable. It's just not whatever you're normally using now. So for example, if you go from diesel fuel to natural gas fuel is considered lower emissions. But likewise, if you go from coal to wind, then also wind is somewhat an alternative to coal. In the scope of the work we're looking at for policy, we're not just talking about electricity, we're also looking at transportation and heat. They have their own challenges because transportation is largely regulated at the national level. It's largely under federal jurisdiction. And heat, other than the terms of selling natural gas and how that natural gas market operates, it's not really a regulated form of energy. Sometimes, it's said that Alberta hasn't been doing anything, but in fact we have, but sometimes we don't share our success stories very well. And so, I'd like to have the opportunity for people in the audience to share their success stories. So first of all, I'm going to ask, is there anybody who has a wind turbine or some solar panels on their property? Raise your hand. Well, congratulations. You are considered an early adopter of technology. Is it wind or solar? Very good. Congratulations. My second question is, how many live in or near a community that generates some electricity from biomass? Drayton Valley over there. Valley Power. Is there anybody who lives near pulp mills or anything like that? Harry Hill. Yeah, they generate electricity from biogas. So although it doesn't contribute a lot to the total, it's something that does happen, and a lot of it happens in rural Alberta. I can say also that Edmonton does generate electricity from biogas. They get it from landfill gas from their waste management facility. And my third question is, who's from southwestern Alberta? Anybody? None? Oh, or who grew up in southwestern Alberta? Put it that way. Oh, there's a couple. So southwestern Alberta is interesting. It has the most diverse deployment of renewable energy because they have small hydro, they have biofuels, liquid biofuels. Obviously, they have wind. They have and solar. They have a great solar resource in the southwest, and there's even a little bit of geothermal, shallow geothermal for heating in some buildings. So southwestern Alberta is kind of interesting that way in what they've accomplished. But here you'll see that the main things that Alberta has done is there are things. Of course, the climate change strategy has been supportive of alternative renewable energy development and the way it's structured. The electricity market, there are some things that do help renewable energy. So for example, the microgeneration gives you a streamlined opportunity for you to set up your own power. Also, Alberta has invested significant transmission in transmission development to the areas in the southwest where the wind resource is the largest. So a number of things. I'm not going to go through them all. The third piece that we've done quite a bit on is and often gets forgotten, but I don't know if you guys are aware of it, is the working on developing a bioeconomy for Alberta. So going beyond the conventional use of crops and biomass to value-added products. So some of you may have crops that go into, say, pharmaceuticals, or you might have material that's made into fiberboard for vehicles, but can also go into bioenergy. So it's part of that mix, and there have been a number of initiatives. And on the bioenergy front, there's actually over the past, since 2007, there's been over 600 million in grant funding put towards bioenergy. So it is a significant area and a huge potential benefit for rural Alberta because it creates new opportunities. Just a snapshot on Alberta's electric generating capacity. So 2007 to 2012, what we have seen that's most noteworthy is there obviously has been significant growth in natural gas generation that is beginning to displace coal, but a significant portion of that, which is the green, is natural gas cogeneration. So that's where you need natural gas for heat, and you got so much heat, you can't even use it, so then you use that heat to generate electricity. So it's actually an efficient use of natural gas. Also, of course, we've seen wind grow from 525 megawatts in 2007 to well over 1,000 in 2012. And biomass kind of holds its own, but it has gone from over 300 to over 400. And what's interesting about biomass, it tends to be baseload capacity. Most of that biomass is in the pulp mills. They're using their waste streams, and they operate 24/7. Just as we're working through trying to determine what should the government consider for encouraging alternative and renewable energy, there are standard processes through government. The important thing as you go through this is government always makes the final decision. So it's I'm not the decision maker. I support and inform their decisions, but I'm not the decision maker. Our government does that. But the key thing is to ensure that we understand where we are today, what are our barriers and opportunities, because they may not be the same as everywhere else. And then any jurisdiction has a number of policy toolkits or policy options they can apply to a problem. So they could do regulatory, which is like the stick. They can make some market rules. There could be financial mechanisms, which could be funding or there may be some kind of loan mechanisms. But so there are a range of things, and it's not just about money, and it's not just about regulations. There are other options. So you have to look to say, what is the problem and what's the best fit to solve that problem as cost effectively as possible, especially considering what Alberta is and what we're like. So now I'm going to try and do the crystal ball bit. So first of all, whenever you look into a crystal ball, you're taking the risk that change is constant, and it's very hard to predict things when you think about what's happened today that you would never have predicted. So when we look back to, say, 2007, 2008, where there was a lot of early identification of the value of alternative renewable energy, the economy was smoking hot. So natural gas prices were high, we had great revenues coming in, the world economy was just zooming, green tech investment, yep, that was a great place to go. It was kind of like when dot-coms were hot, but green tech had a little more to it. And the environmental agenda was very much alive and well in a fairly wealthy world. Then we look today, natural gas in the toilet, really low. Alberta revenue, so we're now gone from a surplus into a deficit situation, trying to deal with that. And there are experts in the room who can advise you on why that's happened. I noted natural disasters because we've seen a few happen over the years. So we had the Slave Lake fires, we've had the Calgary floods. There's things happening that suggest that, whatever the reasons, there's some extreme weather happening, not only around the world, but here at home in Alberta, and we have to live with that reality. Our world economy, it tanked in 2008. And it's kind of picking its feet back up, but we still got a lot of uncertainty as far as the US is concerned, as they still try to sort themselves out. And then green tech, so in the world of renewable energy, it's really hard to get financing. After the economy crashed, a lot of those financiers, they either disappeared completely, they went under, or they became very gun shy, and the rules got tightened up, and so it's very hard to get financing. So that is a big challenge today. And then the environment agenda, what's quite interesting is this may be the first time that the environment has remained on the agenda through tough economic times. In fact, it was even leveraged. You see jurisdictions like the US who leveraged the environmental agenda to create jobs during tough economic times. So environment did not disappear just because economies were having a rough time. So that's good news. So I'm going to take a chance on the crystal ball. This is just me talking. I'm not government on this one. I think it's inevitable that the grid will be greener in the future. At the bottom line is of course what the federal regulations have imposed. So, and from there it's just a question of how much more greener beyond that, or how much faster you want to go on that. My prediction, although I'm not a technology guru, but I think that within the next 5 years or so, that there will be a breakthrough in storage technology that will make storage cheaper, and this will overcome a lot of the problems that happen for wind and solar because they're not available all the time. And it also may change the way you deal with energy in your own home environment. I think that in the transportation sector, we may see more diverse fuel types. So we're very used to liquid transportation fuels, where we tend to have a lot of gasoline, and we use diesel and industrial and on the farm. But we're beginning to see experimentation with natural gas. So that may take off in certain parts of the transportation sector. Of course, electric vehicles often get talked about. So I think there will be a greater diversity at the end of the day, but it will be interesting to see how those choices are made and who chooses to take the risk to be the first one to try out a different fuel type. I think that there will be more on-site generation for whether you as a micro generator. I think that we will become increasingly both energy producers and consumers. So it used to be you were a consumer and that's all it was, but that line is becoming gray. And I think we'll also see increased production of energy from waste, whether that's waste biomass or waste heat, which is like energy efficiency. But I think we'll see that growing, that we'll simply utilize our resources that are currently wasted today. I think we will see them used more effectively, in some aspects for energy, though may be used for other purposes as well. So that's my attempt at the look in the crystal ball. So I hope I finished on time. Pretty good? Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks very much, Susan.